Someone you love will die. You already know this. You have always known it. And somewhere in the back of your mind, quietly, you have already begun to plan what you will do when it happens. You will not leave the body where it falls. You will not simply walk away. Something inside you insists that the person be handled with care, laid down gently, remembered. That insistence feels like the most natural thing in the world. But the real answer is far stranger than instinct, because for almost the entire history of life on Earth, no creature did this. A deer that dies in the forest is left where it drops. A lion that loses a cub sniffs it, waits, and moves on. Death, for nearly every animal that has ever lived, is simply an ending. The body becomes part of the ground, and no one returns to it. And then, somewhere deep in the human past, that changed. A group of upright, hairy, big-brained creatures looked at one of their own who had stopped breathing. And instead of walking away, they stayed. They did something no animal had ever done before. They took the body and they placed it deliberately into the earth. Why? That question sits at the very center of what it means to be human. And the answer takes you into caves, into chemistry, into the strange machinery of your own brain, and back to a moment when your ancestors first understood something no creature had understood before. Let's start with the oldest clue. Deep in a cave system near Johannesburg, South Africa, in a chamber so narrow that adult researchers had to be specially recruited for their small body size just to squeeze through, scientists found bones. Not one skeleton, many. They belonged to a creature called Homo naledi, a small-brained relative of yours with a brain roughly the size of an orange, about a third the size of your own. These creatures lived somewhere between 236,000 and 335,000 years ago. Here is what makes the discovery extraordinary. To reach that chamber, the bodies had to travel through pitch-black passages, down a chute so tight and treacherous that getting a body there could not have happened by accident. The lead researcher, paleoanthropologist Lee Berger, argued that Homo naledi was deliberately placing its dead in that remote chamber. If he is right, a creature with a brain a third the size of yours was already doing something we thought only modern humans did. Now, this claim is genuinely debated. Some scientists argue the bodies could have washed in or fallen in over long stretches of time. So hold that one loosely. Science does not pretend to certainty it hasn't earned. But even the debate tells you something. The question of when your ancestors first cared for their dead reaches back much further than anyone once believed. Move forward in time and the evidence gets harder to argue with. In a cave in northern Iraq, at a site called Shanidar, an archaeologist named Ralph Selecki excavated the remains of Neanderthals across the 1950s and 60s. These were not our species. They were a separate kind of human, thick-boned and powerful, who lived across Europe and the Middle East. And around one of the bodies, Selecki's team found unusual clumps of ancient pollen. He proposed something remarkable, that the Neanderthals had laid flowers on their dead. A burial with flowers 60,000 years ago. That specific flower claim has since been challenged. The leading recent explanation is that solitary bees, nesting in the cave floor, carried the pollen in long after the burial. But newer excavations at the very same cave have found something the critics cannot easily dismiss. A body placed in a deliberate position, in a spot returned to again and again, in a way that looks unmistakably intentional. The Neanderthals, it seems, did not simply abandon their dead either. So the behavior is old. It is older than our species. It may even predate the large modern brain, which raises the deeper question. What is happening inside a mind that makes it do this? The honest answer is that no one can be fully certain. But researchers who study how the mind copes with death have a compelling account, and it begins with something your brain does every waking second. Something you never notice. Your brain is a prediction machine. It does not passively receive the world. It constantly builds a model of what should happen next and checks that model against reality. When you reach for a cup, your brain has already predicted the weight, the temperature, the exact moment your fingers will close. This happens faster than thought. Neuroscientists estimate the signals in your brain travel along their pathways at speeds that let it forecast the immediate future roughly a tenth of a second ahead, just to keep you moving smoothly through a world that is always slightly behind your own predictions. Now think about what a dead body does to that machine. For your entire life, a familiar face has meant a familiar mind behind it. You see the face, and your brain instantly predicts warmth, movement, response, a voice. The face and the person are fused together in your mental model. They are, as far as your brain is concerned, the same thing. Then the person dies, and the face is still there. The body is still there. Everything your brain uses to summon that person is present and intact. But the prediction fails. You wait for the response that always came, and it does not come. You wait again. Nothing. This is the crack that opens the human mind wide. Because to make sense of that failure, your brain has to do something staggering. It has to separate the person from the body. It has to invent the idea that there was something inside that face, something that animated it, and that this something is now gone while the shell remains. In that instant, without words for it, your ancestors may have arrived at the most powerful idea in human history, that a person is more than a body. Once you have that idea, everything changes. If the person is not just the body, then where did they go? Are they watching? Do they still matter? Should they be treated with respect even now? A creature that asks those questions is no longer just surviving. It is imagining an unseen world. And a creature that imagines an unseen world will, sooner or later, dig a grave. There's a name for the mental trick underneath all of this. Psychologists call it dualism, the intuition that mind and body are separate things. And here's the unsettling part. Much research on young children suggests they arrive at this intuition largely on their own, with little teaching at all. The psychologist Paul Bloom has argued that we are natural-born dualists, and in experiments by Jesse Bering and others, children readily conclude that a person's thoughts and feelings could continue even after their body stops working. Your brain seems built to believe the person outlasts the body. Burial is simply that belief made physical, pressed into the ground. But there is another force at work, and this one is far more practical. This one is chemistry. A dead body does not stay the same. Within hours, the trillions of bacteria that lived peacefully in the gut, no longer held in check, begin to consume their host from the inside. Enzymes break cell walls. Gases build. The body begins to release a cocktail of compounds, and two of them have names that tell you everything: putrescine and cadaverine. These molecules are the smell of death, and your nose is extraordinarily, almost supernaturally, tuned to detect them. Why would evolution build you to detect the smell of your own dead so precisely? Because a rotting body is a beacon. It draws scavengers. It breeds disease. For a social animal living close together, a corpse in the middle of the group is a genuine threat to everyone still breathing. Your ancestors who felt a deep, gut-level revulsion at that smell and who acted on it by removing the body were less likely to get sick. They survived. They had children, and those children inherited the same instinct. So look at what has happened. Two completely different forces, arriving from opposite directions, meet in the same act. On one side, the mind, aching with the impossible idea that a loved one is both here and gone, needing to do something with the grief. On the other side, the body, decaying, dangerous, demanding to be dealt with. Love pulls you toward the body. Chemistry pushes you away from it. And burial is the one act that answers both at once. You keep the person close. You put the danger safely underground. You solve the problem of the heart and the problem of the flesh in a single handful of earth. That is why it feels so natural. That is why it feels like instinct. because in a sense, it is. Once the practice took hold, it grew into something even larger. Around 100,000 years ago, at a site called Kafse in what is now Israel, humans buried a child with deer antlers laid carefully on its chest. Not food, not tools for survival. A gesture, a meaning. By 34,000 years ago, at a site called Sunghir in Russia, 2 children were buried with more than 10,000 carved ivory beads, each one requiring perhaps an hour of labor to make. Do the arithmetic, and it is thousands of hours of work, sewn into the graves of children who could no longer benefit from any of it. That is not survival. That is love, expressed in the only currency the living had. And that is the thing to hold on to. Every one of those graves was dug by hand, in grief, by someone who did not want to let go. The beads, the antlers, the flowers, the careful positioning of the body, all of it says the same thing across tens of thousands of years. You mattered. You are still one of us. We will not simply walk away. Which brings you back to where you started. Someone you love will die. And when they do, you will not leave the body where it falls. You will lay them down with care. You will mark the place. You will gather people who also loved them, and you will stand together in the oldest ritual your species has ever performed, one that reaches back through sunghir and shanidar and into caves whose names we may never know. You will do it because 100,000 years ago, a creature much like you looked at a still and silent face, felt the impossible collision of love and loss, and understood for the first time that a person is more than a body. That understanding is your inheritance. It is written into your grief, your revulsion, your tenderness, your need to say goodbye. The animals of the forest still walk away from their dead. You never will. And that single difference, that refusal to walk away, may be the truest measure of how human you are.